America is counting on the GOP to get it right, and that's why the establishment can't blow it.
That, of course, Sarah Palin, the keynote speaker last night at the CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference here in Washington. Now to discuss all the week's politics, I'm back with our roundtable. Andrea Mitchell, Ron Fournier, Ralph Reed, and Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. Welcome to all of you. So they did a straw poll. We talk about, I should say this first. We want to talk about the future of the Republican Party, and the gathering of CPAC in Washington is a big deal for a lot of us who cover politics because we're trying to gauge to what extent the party is rebuilding and what it says the personalities say, what the messages say about where the party is going. So here's the results from the straw polls. You look at Ted Cruz there. Rand Paul on top again, 31%, Ted Cruz second. Ralph Reed, what does this gathering tell us about where the party is?
Well, it tells you that they want somebody who's going to be an unapologetic defender of unalloyed, undiluted conservatism. I think what concerns them about, for lack of a better term, the establishment, I'm not a big fan of that term, but certainly the elected official wing of the party, the consulting class, is that they sometimes unintentionally, sometimes intentionally view the core principles of the party: limited government, stronger families, a forward-leaning foreign policy and national defense posture, lower taxes, economic growth, as somehow a liability rather than an asset. Sometimes they treat it like an albatross. And, you know, sometimes, David, when you see some of these leaders on programs like this, and they get asked about why the Republican Party stands for the dignity of every individual, including the unborn, why they believe in the sanctity of life, it's like they get a hunted look in their eyes. So I think some of this is stylistic, but if the party is going to win, you're going to need to have two wings to fly. You can't just do it with one or the other.
And I think I noticed Ralph taking notes during your interview just there. I think he laid out, the Cardinal laid out the recipe for the Republican Party. The Catholic Church, the Pope is trying to show how you can change an ossified, dying institution and revitalize it with symbolism, with empathy, with humility, and that you can expand a tent, a religious tent, a business tent, a political tent, without undermining your core base. And I know this is something you and I have talked about. Can the Republican Party expand itself without turning off the base?
But if you look at the list of candidates in the straw poll, I don't think that's expanding the base at all. And if you look at who attended CPAC, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Exactly.
Well, and there's still such a fight over what it means to be a conservative. So you mentioned the establishment. I mean, these Tea Party folks are saying, look, the establishment is still is clinging to compromise and to the size and scope of government in a way that turns us off.
I think Rand Paul, among all of those who were present, has expanded his base. He has a younger generational base as well, partly inherited from his father, but he is broadening his message. So I think he has really improved his message. Chris Christie was invited, this last year was not. He is invited now as the head of the Republican governors, but Chris Christie is not a player in that part of the party. But I do think that there's one person to pick up on Ron Fournier's analogy with what Cardinal Dolan was saying about a pope who is, you know, sticking to core principles, but presenting a different, more humble and much broader and more inclusive image. And that could be Jeb Bush. And Ralph and I were just talking about that. Jeb Bush has that different approach on immigration and on education.
And Rand Paul, just to follow up on Andrea's point, the CPAC came out at the same time the Pew Research Center did another really good report on millennials. And if you look at millennials, this rising generation, they don't fit neatly into either party. They really don't like either party. They're independent, and they tend to be a little bit libertarian. They really have a problem with Barack Obama on the NSA stuff. They really want a government that is more 21st century, more tech savvy, and not impinging so much on civil liberties. And I think Rand Paul can connect with that.
But they're also more pro-life than baby boomers and older Americans. So it's hard to categorize them. But a lot
Actually,
of this,
it's not true. They're as pro-life.
You see this at CPAC. You're going to see it as this field begins to shake out as we move through 2014 and 15. A lot of this is about connecting with voters and constituencies that haven't always felt welcome in our ranks. You know, my good friend, the late Jack Kemp, used to say that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And the Republican Party's got to do what Francis is doing with the Catholic Church. Francis is putting the poor and care for the poor and amelioration of the poverty where it belongs, which is at the center of the gospel. If people who are lower middle class, who are struggling, who are poor, who are wanting to climb that ladder of opportunity, but they're having a hard time grabbing that first rung, if they don't think conservatives and Republicans have a vision for the future that includes them,
Then
their message will be badly damaged.
But I do think if we look at Republican policies, if we look at the budgets over the last couple of years, there really isn't anything there that says we're going to reach out to the middle class. I mean, in
That's not
fact, we
true.
didn't even extend unemployment insurance. If you look at the diversity at CPAC, there were 163 speakers, 35 were women.
Well, they don't
Look
want
at the
government
room.
to be leading the way. I mean, this is really about the size and reach of government. That's what the debate is about.
Right. It is. But, you know, you have to look at the room that they had, which was talking about diversity. In that room, it was virtually empty. There were hundreds of seats. There was
Well,
really
can
no
I,
one
can I
there.
just point out one thing?
Sure.
In fact, the most successful anti-poverty program since the Great Society is the $1,000 child tax credit. That was part of the contract with America. We advocated it when I was at the Christian Coalition. In 2011, the last year for which we have data available, there were 9 million people lifted out of poverty. That's a fully refundable tax credit, by the way.
And it'll be interesting
That was
to see
our
whether that
policy.
gets
Bill Clinton
continued
vetoed it
based
3
on
times.
what the Republicans are planning.
Well, but it was vetoed 3 times. And when Mike Lee just announced his tax reform package, I guess yesterday or the day before, what did he propose? Taking that child tax credit to $2,500, making it fully refundable. So what you do, David, is you get rid of the bureaucracy, you get rid of all this panoply of government programs which are inefficient, and you give the funds directly to
Let
the
me
people.
ask you, I want to ask a couple of pragmatic questions about politics. Chris Christie, is he done, Ron? Or do you think the big money in the Republican Party donors are looking at him and saying, well, he's got some time here to come back?
It's too early to say that anybody's done. But the golden brand of someone who is a nonpartisan, or at least could work across party lines, who was an uncorruptible, who was politics unusual, that is very, very damaged. And it is hard to see. His road to the presidency is much tougher than it was. And it was never easy because his brand didn't really fit neatly into the Republican primary. Ironically, he might have done himself some good with the Republican primary audience because he's now can beat up on the media. But it's harder to see him become president than it was 6 months ago.